Morning, everybody. Tim Long at Zylpha here again. We've still got a few people joining, but I think we're going to press on because we're very conscious about the time. First thing is just to thank everyone for taking time out to join us this morning. We thought it was quite important that we had an opportunity just to really sort of review some of the changes in the legal market this year and put those into context with some of the development plans that we have for next year. And we thought it would be a useful vehicle to do that via a webinar. Just a couple of points of housekeeping first. The webinar controls that you should have, I know a lot of you have been on our webinars before, so you've used GoToWebinar. You should have a little control panel on your screen. You'll see a little right pointing a little white arrow on a red background. We put a little box around it on the screen there. That'll just slide the control panel away, so if the control panel's getting in the way of the presentation, you can just slide it away and slide it back out if you want to. In terms of questions, we found in the past that the most useful way of asking questions is probably just by typing them in the box at the bottom. It's a very, very well attended webinar this morning, so there is a chance that we'll get an awful lot of questions, and in the time we've got, we'll probably not have time to be able to get through them all. If that's the case, what we propose to do is to lift the questions out that you've asked, type them all up together with the replies, and then we'll circulate those to everybody that's attended. If there's only a few questions or anything we can answer as we go along, we will. So if you have any questions, please feel free to type them in the box, and we'll deal with as many as we can as we're going through. Just to introduce the topics that we're looking at covering today, they're all up there on the slide, so I won't read them out. The people that we've got involved as well, we thought it was important that you knew what we all looked like. I'm Tim Long. Nigel Spicer is our development manager. We'll be looking at the document bundling side of things. Vicky Ellis, who's our ops manager, will be just going through the user adoption element under support and onboarding. David, who many of you, in fact most of you will know, our senior technical consultant and our claims portal expert, will be talking about the MOJ, or claims portal I think we have to call it now. And just sitting here and making sure that we're doing it all properly is our marketing manager, Dave Chapman. So Dave will be just trying to deal with as many questions as we can as we go through, and driving all the slides and everything. So if something goes wrong, it's Dave's fault. So just by way of introduction, the legal market has been changing fairly significantly over the course of the last year. In many respects, we're still coming out of recession, or certainly still feeling the effects of it, and the changes have been fairly significant. As an organisation, we deal with the private and the public sector, and our client base here is split roughly 50-50 across the public and private sector. So we get to see quite a lot of different approaches to changes in the legal market. The legal press has been quite interesting this year, and I tend to read the Gazette, which we get here daily. And the interesting thing in the Gazette is not necessarily the articles that come out in it, is the comments that get made on the articles that come out in it. And just recently, in fact, a common theme through this year has been the rise and fall of the ABS. Paribus are very well publicised. I'm sure the detractors would say failure of ABS. Paribus now being sold off at a loss and broken up. But there are other entrants in this market. PwC is one who said that they're going to be entering this market, and even just this week, one that's really stood out has been Legalzoom. They've just announced their first acquisition of a UK law firm, which is Beaumont Legal, up in Wakefield. And interestingly, where the comments in the Gazette about Paribus were almost exclusively negative, the comments about Legalzoom have been almost exclusively positive, in the sense that a lot of people are saying this is definitely something to look at. This is definitely going to be a major player in the market. Legalzoom has Craig Holt at the helm now, who was the original founder of Quality Solicitors. So it's definitely going to be an interesting one to watch, and a few people in there saying if I was a conveyancer I'd be extremely worried. So there's going to be some changes, I think, coming through next year as a result of that. We've also seen portals play quite a part over the legal landscape this year. The claims portal, which David will be talking about in a bit, is an obvious contender there. Very interesting to watch that develop over the years, the huge amount of negative press around it when it was launched, and by and large now it is accepted as being a fairly reasonable way of running volume claims if that's the market that you're into. And of course, recently as well, the conveyancing portal with VAO. Something I'll talk about a little bit later with conveyancing, but VAO is now dead and has been pulled, and I think was a very misguided approach into the market by the Law Society partnering with a software organisation, really without looking particularly hard at what the market was going to do in that particular area. So I'll talk a wee bit more about that a little later. We've also been doing quite a lot of work through most of this year with some of our London Borough clients, in particular South London Legal Partnership, on digital courtrooms and how we can help digitise the experience in the public law family courts. Very successful pilot on that running in the West London Family Court, and hopefully soon to be extended through to Central and then ultimately out to East and other areas of London. Very interesting on this one, really, to see the adoption of the court service of this. And the court service traditionally have been a little bit reluctant to adopt technology, but they've been absolutely fantastic on this project, and we really have been sort of a key driver behind getting the efficiency of running courtrooms electronically into being. And they're officially going live at the beginning of next year in West London Family Court. So we'll talk a wee bit more about that a bit later as well. In terms of the law firms themselves and legal organisations, we found a lot of people particularly concerned about user adoption, which Vicky's going to be talking about. And this is just the adoption by users of new products, and not necessarily our products. This is just generally software products within legal organisations. That seems to be becoming a big problem for people at the moment. So Vicky's going to talk a bit about the areas we've been working on there, and also just helping law firms and organisations engage with their clients in a more productive way. That's enough from me to start off with. I'm going to hand over to Nigel, who's our development manager. Nigel's going to talk about document bundling. This is our, I guess we would call our flagship product. Document bundling is really just the process of taking documents in a variety of different formats, converting them into PDF, indexing and paginating them. Traditionally that would have been for use as a court bundle, but more and more we're finding that clients are finding new and innovative uses for this within law firms that we'd never thought of. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Nigel.
Thanks, Tim. Hi, everyone. I'm the development manager here, as Tim mentioned, and I'm going to talk today about bundling and what we've got planned for the year ahead. We've specialised in bundle creation software at Zylpha now for over 10 years. We offer a standalone and an integrated version of bundling, the integrated version with sole case and visual files. So the first area that I'm going to talk about is the look and feel of bundling, or the user interface. So we've improved functionality in bundling greatly over the years. And in that time, we've learned an awful lot from our users about how they create bundles and the various uses that they have for bundling. Things like disclosures and archiving, areas that we wouldn't really have expected or envisaged people using bundling. But not much has changed in that time of how bundling looks and feels for working when people have worked with it. So having spoken to clients and people talking to us about it, the whole area sort of feels that needs a freshen up. So we started a project where we spoke to clients about how we could improve the way bundling works to make it more intuitive and simpler use, and re-examine exactly the process we go through when people are creating bundles. So we've put all these ideas together and have started a project where we can hopefully reshape the user interface to make user adoption a lot easier for everybody. On that, if anybody would like to be involved in this process, we'd love to hear from you. It would be a chance to have a direct impact on how the interface works and the changes that we're going to make. At the end, we'll put up an email address, so if anybody is interested in being involved, it would be fantastic to have your input. Neatly tied into the interface changes is accessibility. Not only do we want to make it more intuitive, we also want to make it as accessible to as many users as possible, including those with disabilities. We've always had accessibility built into bundling, but we've always known there's more that we could do on this. We're working with a large government organisation that have a team that specialise in this area, getting us up to the required standards. Our initial plan is to support two standard industry products, Nuance Dragon, which is a voice control system, and JAWS, which is a screen reader. JAWS stands for Job Access with Speech. But the plan will be certainly to support more of these products going forward. One of bundling's great strengths has been a number of supported file formats that it can take. We're always looking for new areas where bundling could be useful, and for example, this year the coroners appeared as an opportunity for us where there was many uses for bundling in that area. Recently, clients have been speaking to us about medical records, and we're going to look at changing bundling so we can support the DICOM file type, which is greatly used for passing medical records around. If there are any others, again, it would be great to hear from people out there. If there's a file type that we could use or should be using that we don't convert at the minute, then that would be great to hear from you again. Another great strength with bundling has been its ability to connect to various document stores. On that, one of the ones that's sort of always been a little bit clunky has been the Outlook connector. This has been mentioned to us a number of times, and earlier this year we added the ability to add attachments into the bundling system directly from within bundling. But now we plan to enable people to create emails from Outlook straight into bundling, so that it would hopefully make the process a lot easier. It's surprising how many people use Outlook as their document stores. And finally, the last thing I have to talk to you about is the latest release of bundling. We, in November, released version 4.4. There's been a lot of changes in this release, but just give you a couple of examples. We've added a Worksite client connector. We do have a Worksite connector, which is by web service, but the client connector has the added advantage that we're now using the Worksite dialogues, which so that it's a lot easier for the user to understand and see dialogues exactly as they used to before. Another change which has been requested was the ability to add password-protected PDFs directly into bundling. This has caused people quite a few problems down the years. So now you can actually add the password in as you create the bundle, and it will go through and add directly into the bundle for creation initially. So there's an awful lot of things planned for next year, and these are just some of the highlights, but hopefully it'll give you some idea of the direction in which we're moving. So the next thing is for me is to hand over to David Hayter, who's going to talk to you about the claims portal. For those of you who know David, he's worked with Sole Case and Visual Files for over 20 years now, and he's been our main person for the claims portal and all the changes involved in that.
Okay, thank you, Nigel. As Nigel said, I've been in the business for 20 odd years. Many of you will have come across me in my days at Visual Files and later LN. I'm going to talk about the claims portal and our plans for the integration. As many of you will know, the claims portal was introduced by the MOJ around 5 years ago, and it allowed claimant representatives and insurers to process low-value personal injury claims, hopefully more easily, efficiently and consistently. And largely, I think most users would grudgingly admit that it's met its objectives in that time. Initially, it covered road traffic claims only, but in 2013 it was extended to cover employer liability and public liability claims. There's been talk of further extension to cover clinical negligence claims too, but as yet we're not aware of any firm plans or timescales on that. Zylpha developed the Rapid RTA program a few years ago to provide a suite of web service calls which allowed communication with the portal via its A2A interface. And for customers that have sole case or visual files case management systems, we then built a skeletal application in sole case to collect, collate and validate the relevant data for transmission into the portal, and then to receive, process and render any data that was retrieved. Since the introduction of the portal, it's been enhanced and extended a number of times with major releases in September 2012 and July 2013. ELPL support was added in September 2013, as I said, and we at that time introduced a new separate Zylpha product to service it. The two Zylpha products together have kept pace with the regular updates from the portal as far as possible, and they've also evolved and grown in their own right in the light of customer experience and feedback. And I think anybody involved with the portal has gone through quite an incredible learning curve over the last 5 years. This year, the portal organisation has concentrated on providing a redesigned web interface. Some might say that was long overdue. But there have been no significant changes to the A2A functionality, fortunately for us. However, we've not sat on our laurels, and we've continued to review and enhance both the Rapid RTA and the ELPL products. In fact, we have new versions in final testing right now that we hope to release at the beginning of January. These releases concentrate on improving usability. In particular, we've redesigned the workflow button screens. There's an example of one of them shown on the slide. We've made the buttons larger, clearer, hopefully more intuitive with the layout, and more importantly, we've included a display of the current claim status and guidance notes that go with that status to help the user. Now, the portal functions are somewhat regimented in that at some stages the user is forced to step through a defined sequence of 2 or 3 separate functions. Now, historically, that would mean that separately they'd have to hit 3 separate buttons in sequence in the application. And indeed on the portal website. So what we've tried to do there in the new releases is to make the logic to link those stages, those steps together in the actual scripting, so that the user is allowed the option to go from one stage to the next much more seamlessly. And hopefully that will save time and be a lot less frustrating for the users. As for the next year, the portal organisation, as some may know, have announced that there will be a release 5, and that's going to be rolled out in 2 phases, with the first phase due in April. Now, that's largely around further changes to the website and preparatory work for future development, so they tell us. So hopefully there will not be any significant impact on the A2A functionality. Phase 2, which is due out in December is likely to have a much more significant effect, and that will include major changes, including a revised CNF, claim notification form, and also a requirement to charge on the issue of the claims notification form. Clinical negligence, I mentioned earlier, that may also be in the mix. We don't know, because we won't know until they issue the documentation, and that's due in September. So therefore, we're going to have a rather interesting 3-month window between September and December to respond to whatever it is that they throw at us with the Release 5 changes. So we're already thinking in terms of setting aside resource for that period. So rest assured, we will be prepared. Okay. So that's really just about all I've got to say about the portal. If you'd like to know more about our new releases and the longer term plans for the portal integration, please don't hesitate to contact us. I'll now pass over to Vicky Ellis, who heads up the customer services team, to talk about, rather appropriately, customer services.
Thank you very much, David. As David said, I'm Vicky Ellis. I'm the operations manager at Zylpha, and yeah, I'm the one on the left in that picture. I head up the support team, and generally we are responsible for the majority of day-to-day communications with our customers and our users. Today I'm going to talk to you about the subject of user adoption and how we at Zylpha are taking steps to help with this. So this year, we've seen an increasing number of law firms and local authorities concerned and sort of raising interest about user adoption of the software that has been introduced. There seems to be a greater recognition that often software is generally purchased by the partners or managers for use by their fee earners and other staff, but this isn't always necessarily used to support the actual process that exists within their organisation. In fact, sometimes the first time the actual software users have a chance to engage with a product is at their first training session, or sometimes even at go live. Often they're not having the opportunity to consider what might be the best way to implement that software as part of their own normal working routine. As a result, user adoption can end up greatly reduced, which leaves firms with the problem of having large amounts of different software simply not being used fully or even at all. What we have seen, though, are a few firms that are now addressing this by including user adoption within their rollout plans to prepare their users for the introduction of new software, and this is often even before the actual product training is delivered. We have worked with a few organisations now where we've been able to assist this process by running workshops with their users, often in groups via webinar online. This usually takes the form out of a product demonstration to the users and then a discussion with them about how the software can best be used within their organisation. We found that this seems to help engage users, and it often gets a really good debate going amongst the members in the team about the introduction of the new software. And it encourages everyone to have a think about their own individual processes and how this new piece of software relates to them. More often than not, the overall process ends up being improved and the users are far more comfortable with the introduction of a new product. This inevitably means that user adoption ends up being far greater and bringing with that many more benefits to the organisation. And then this leads me on to the other point that I wanted to mention today, which is our new e-learning module, which we're very excited about. Following on from the success of the user adoption webinars, we're now aiming to provide a training portal to enable us to create a centralised product knowledge in one place that is easily accessible online to our users. In the next year, we're going to be working to provide more online resource which includes the traditional training documentation, release notes on a variety of products that include our document bundling software and also our Soulcase and Visual Files integrations. We will also be introducing our new e-learning modules, which are going to be interactive online training videos that users can access and learn about the software at their own pace. And that brings me to the end of my update, and I'm going to hand you back to Mr. Long, who's going to talk to you about electronic signatures.
Thank you for that very formal handover, Vicky. Speak to you later. Right, electronic signatures. I am slightly conscious of the time here, so I'll try and keep this fairly brief. A lot of you will know of the work that we've been doing with electronic signatures. We've got a large number of sites now using them. Very briefly, there's a lot of uncertainty in the market about the difference between electronic signatures and digital signatures. An electronic signature is a graphical representation of a real signature. A digital signature is where a document is signed with effectively with a code that's obtained. So they are slightly different things. We've been doing this now for 2 or 3 years. We primarily started working with a client in the PI market who had a particular cost and efficiency issue. They had to get terms of business signed before they could get claims onto the portal, and dealing with those terms of business electronically with the client was a very obvious solution. We looked around the market and selected the Adobe EchoSign, as it was then named, product to integrate with. It was a very easy system to use and it had great integration hooks, so we could create something fairly quickly. Originally, the driver for this was cost and efficiency, but we're finding more and more we're having conversations with people now around risk and compliance. And we're seeing it spreading into other areas as well. So we'll talk a bit more about conveyancing in a moment. But we're seeing it spreading into particularly the property-related market, and also little sort of discrete areas between other workflows as well. But effectively, what it allows you to do is to, in the context of terms of business, for example, send your terms of business out to the client, possibly even fully automatically if you're running a system like Visual Files or case management system. The client would then sign the terms of business electronically. They can do that on a mobile phone or a tablet or a PC. And they then, the document would be returned, signed directly back into your case management system. So it makes the process of compliance automatic, and it enables you to build that kind of process into your workflow, so you can make sure that certain steps are handled and the client's authorising the various steps as you go through a transaction. We've done a bit of work this year with form filling in particular. So it's possible to extract data from forms that the client fills in and pump that data directly back into a case management system. And it's also possible now to extract attachments that the user or the signer has attached as part of the signing process and push those back into a case or document management system. A few changes from Adobe coming out. They've got to move to an EU data center, which is due Q1 next year. This is following the safe harbour ruling that came out earlier this year. So Adobe's data will all be housed in the EU from early part of New Year. From our point of view, we maintain a track of the status of the documents that are currently out for signature. And we're moving that infrastructure onto an Azure platform moving into next year as well, which just gives us greater scalability and performance. We're also next year looking at extending the integration from Adobe, which is a great solution, but we are coming across a few clients now looking to use, or perhaps they already use, other systems such as DocuSign. DocuSign is a very capable electronic signature solution. And some quite notable users of that system, so we'll be looking to extend our usage into that area over the course of next year as well. Just briefly then turning to the conveyancing market. I was a former property lawyer, so it's a particular pet area of mine. A lot of moves, or a lot of discussion really about what state the housing market is in at the moment, and depending on whose figures you read, the the market is still probably coming out of recession. House prices seem to have slumped in the last few months, but generally our clients are reporting that they're a lot busier than they were. And what they're trying to do is to cope with that increase in workload, not by filling departments full of people, but by making their processes that much more efficient. And as a conveyancer, you've got quite a lot of stuff to choose from. The Land Registry, who I've always been very impressed with, they're always at the forefront of innovation in this area in ways that other sort of pseudo-government departments aren't. But they made all their data available via Business Gateway some years ago. They started charging for it initially, but they now no longer charge, or not the subscription model that they did have. So getting data and documents out of the Land Registry is a lot easier than it was. The other end of that process is the Electronic Document Registration Service, or EDRS integration, that enables you to register documents with a Land Registry. Now, we've got integrations into both of those. We built an integration, a full Business Gateway integration, 2 or 3 years ago now. We were one of the first integrators to do it. But we've never actually made it commercially available. At the time, there just didn't seem to be the impetus in the market to do that. And again, as the others have said on their areas, we'd be very interested to hear from anyone that is interested in taking that up. We would need a core of committed users to make that commercially available, but it is there, it is available, and it integrates out of the box into visual files. EDRS, on the other hand, we've got quite a few sites already using that, particularly in the volume area of remortgages. We've got one in particular who now handles all of their registrations for their remortgage business completely electronically with no user intervention whatsoever. Other things coming out in the conveyancing market, we've been involved with the Land Registry on digital signatures on mortgage deeds. They're due to release that, well, they said April next year, so I guess that probably means middle of next year. That'll make quite a difference to the volume remortgage people. It takes a big manual step out. Users will be able to register for a digital signature and then sign their mortgage deed digitally online. And the Land Registry are putting in place a rule change that permits that. That opens the way for other documents as well, such as transfers, but mortgage deed will be going first. So quite a big change and a good process improvement led by the Land Registry there. The other one obviously is Conveyancing Portals. VAO has recently been pulled, very misguided in my view, attempt by the Law Society to go into this area. And it's really been pulled purely as a result of a couple of software organisations through the Legal Software Supply Association getting together and coming up with a competitor in a fraction of the time that they've announced is free and will always be free. It's completely the right model in our view. We did some prototyping in this area a couple of years ago, and the conclusion we came to was that in order to have a successful conveyancing portal, it would have to be free. There was no other way of making it work. And the free to convey package is now already out there and live. And we will most certainly be looking to build an integration into that as soon as their API is available for us to do that. And that really also links into what we're looking to do with conveyancing next year as a whole. We've got quite a few integrations that we've done over the years with a lot of sites using them all individually. Things like electronic identity verification, obviously the document bundling, the electronic signatures integration, and then the free to convey and EDRS integration. So we're looking to put together a package of conveyancing solutions for next year and make that available to the conveyancing market. Largely that will be driven by the visual files user base, as that's the user base that we do a great deal of work with. But potentially it could be, or certainly elements of it could be used by other case management systems if necessary. So I've had Dave waving at me frantically for the last few minutes, so that we've gone a little bit over time already. Just in terms of summary, really think in putting all of this together, the thing that highlighted to us was that risk and compliance and user adoption are the key things that we've been speaking to people about this year, and I think likely to be the key things moving forwards into next year. Everybody is now increasingly regulated and having to prove their ability to comply, and IT provides a great way in many cases to do that. It's not a silver bullet and answer to everything, but there's a lot of solutions out there to help with risk and compliance. user adoption has been a very interesting one, as Vicky said. More and more clients talking to us about how they can get better adoption of the systems that they've got. And really, that seems to be just through greater user engagement and involving them in the process all the way through. And overall, I think this comes back down to what we've really been doing for the last few years, which is helping people driving more efficiency through what they already have. So it's not necessarily throwing out system A and replacing it with system B and just ending up with a similar set of problems. It's how can you make better use of what you've got. So our focus through next year is going to be around those three things. Thank you very much, everybody, for attending. We'll just have a quick roundup and see what we've got question-wise.
Hi, everybody. David here. We have had a few questions, not too many, so we will try and go through maybe 2 or 3 now. And if you have any more, just quickly pop them over now, and we'll pick as many as we can. First one's for Tim. It's basically around electronic mortgage deeds, which you touched on. And it's will there be an equivalent to the electronic mortgage deeds for Scotland?
Great question, and I'm not completely certain of the answer. I think the answer is no, but I will double check that with the Land Registry. The Land Registry initiative, I think, is focused on England and Wales. I will double check that, Adrian, and I'll circulate an answer to everybody once I check that. I'm pretty sure that the answer is no, it's England and Wales, but I'll check that with the Land Reg and see if there's any difference on that.
Got another question coming through, or come through again for Tim. Sorry, Vicky and Nigel. It's quite broad, but basically you touched on digital courtrooms at the start, and we'll make this the last question because we are running over, but could you just provide a quick sort of synopsis on that? I've had a couple of people asking about digital courtrooms.
Yeah, the digital courtrooms project has been working with South London Legal Partnership, which is an amalgamation of 4 South London boroughs who now provide legal services to those 4 boroughs, and looking at ways that we can improve the efficiency of their work with, well, in their case, the West London Family Court, but with family courts in general. The idea is that they produce electronic bundles for their cases, their childcare cases, and you can imagine they do quite a high volume of these. The bundles for court, rather than being delivered in paper format, are then shared with the court electronically. And most critically on this project have been shared with the judiciary appointed to those particular hearings, whether they be magistrates or district judges. The idea being that we completely eliminate paper from that process. Now, it's an interesting project because the driver has been efficiency and cost, and the really interesting facet of it from my point of view has been the adoption of it by the court service, who have been thrilled with the way that it's improved their process for very little cost to them. The cost in this case being borne by the local authorities. It's going to be interesting to see how that filters on through the rest of civil, but it does kind of open up the possibility, and it warms the court service up to dealing with more and more bundles electronically. So that's really what that project has been for. So hopefully watch this space for greater adoption of that project throughout London as well.
Thank you. And finally, we've just got time for one more question. Again, I'm sorry, it is for Tim. How long come through saying, do you need to have a case management system to use e-signatures?
Short answer is no. There's absolutely no reason why you can't sign up for an Adobe account. It used to be called EchoSign, it's now called eSign, but if you go onto the Adobe website, there's links there to follow, and you can use the system just through a web browser, and the same with DocuSign as well. There are other providers are available. Your question also refers to digital signatures. Both Adobe and DocuSign do now provide facilities for digital signatures, which are different, as I mentioned at the beginning, to electronic signatures. Generally speaking, most of our clients are moving towards electronic signatures. I suspect that digital ultimately will replace electronic, but both of the 2 major providers, Adobe and DocuSign, will support both, and you can do that through a straight web account without the need for a case management system or integration.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. I guess that concludes our webinar for today. thank you all for attending. If you have any questions, contact details are up on here, and we will send out shortly just a brief feedback questionnaire, just so that we can see what you think of it and how we can improve. Once again, thank you for your time, and we'll speak to you soon.